Sandra Dee appeared on the silver screen at an age when most children were still learning to play, her face flawless, her eyes wide and innocent, her smile capable of convincing an entire nation that she was the very embodiment of goodness. By the late 1950s, she had become Hollywood's teenage superstar, her name splashed across movie posters, magazine covers, and the fantasies of a public eager for a perfect icon. But behind that idealized image was a child whose life had been meticulously directed, whose identity was being quietly molded and constrained. Hollywood didn't merely showcase Sandra Dee's talent, it crafted her, disciplined her, and slowly chipped away at her sense of self. While fans adored her apparent purity, in private, Sandra wrestled with anxiety, depression, disordered eating, and the confusion of never fully knowing who she was outside of her public image. Her natural gift for conveying emotion and vulnerability made her a sensation, but it also left her exposed to an industry that never learned to protect the very child it celebrated. Fame came before she had the chance to develop resilience, and when the stage lights dimmed, all that remained was emptiness. Sandra's story is not just one of a star who bloomed too early, it is a portrait of the cost of perfection, of a girl who began losing herself the moment the world began to love her. Born Alexandra Zuck in 1942 in Beyond, New Jersey, Sandra's childhood was unstable. Her parents separated when she was very young, and her world contracted to revolve entirely around her mother, Mary Zuck. Decisions, big or small, were made for her. Obedience was ingrained before she even realized she could have a choice. Money, too, was never hers to manage. Earnings from modeling, advertising, and photo shoots flowed directly through her mother's hands. From an early age, she learned that her worth was measured by the contracts she signed, yet control over her life and earnings belonged entirely to others. By age 4 or 5, playtime had been replaced by work. She posed for hours, held perfect expressions, and endured one photo shoot after another. Nights were spent in hotels with tutors, preparing for the next day's schedule. There were no friends waiting, only lessons and assignments. Praise came for compliance, not for the child herself. Abuse by her stepfather occurred in the quiet spaces that allowed daytime work to continue uninterrupted. Sandra learned to separate private trauma from her professional life, compartmentalizing pain to survive. Her body became a site of constant scrutiny. Costume adjustments, lighting, and camera angles dictated what she could show. She internalized these unspoken rules. Her body was no longer fully her own but part of a carefully constructed image. By the early 1950s, she was a familiar face in New York's advertising world. By 1956, she was earning around $75,000, a sum that demanded constant motion, leaving no time to pause, rest, or simply be a child. School life was subordinated to work. Class schedules bent to accommodate filming, and friendships were transient, tied only to temporary projects. Childhood was not abruptly stolen, it was gradually whittled away until only efficiency and productivity remained. Eating became strategic, weight was a performance metric. Skipping meals was a silent form of control, a way to assert some agency in a life dominated by external demands. Discipline blended into self-punishment, learned quietly, without explicit enforcement. Hollywood soon took notice. Until They Sail, 1957, marked her move from modeling into film. The movie didn't instantly create a sensation, but it proved she could be relied upon, adaptable, youthful, innocent. That same year, a Golden Globe for New Star of the Year cemented her place in the studio system. Universal Studios didn't just hire an actress, they acquired the right to manage her image completely. Every hairstyle, outfit, and public appearance was curated. Growing up naturally was no longer an option, her adolescence had become a production to be directed. By 1959, Imitation of Life made her a household name. The film earned over $50 million, and her face became inseparable from the ideal of innocence the public had come to expect. Gig reinforced the archetype, cheerful, bright, and non-threatening. Sandra wasn't merely an actress anymore, she was a guarantee of comfort and reassurance. Deviating from the template was not tolerated, any shift threatened the career carefully constructed around her image. The very system that elevated her also confined her. Roles demanded perpetual youthfulness, and maintaining her figure became a job requirement. Long hours, endless publicity appearances, and packed schedules left no room for private growth. Her marriage to Bobby Darin added yet another layer of obligations. Pregnancies and miscarriages unfolded privately, with little time to process grief. Medication, first to maintain stamina and later to cope emotionally, blurred into dependence. Alcohol became a tool to survive unbearable loss and exhaustion. The traumas of her childhood shaped her adulthood. Relationships and intimacy were filtered through a history of survival, silence, and compliance. Conflicts with Bobby weren't simply domestic, they were collisions of unresolved pasts. Divorce didn't come from a lack of love, it came from the impossibility of sustaining a public image while managing decades of hidden trauma. After Bobby's death at 37, isolation deepened. Alcohol and eating disorders worsened. Without the studio structure to shield her, daily life became a confrontation with the self. In 1994, she published Dream Lovers, reclaiming her narrative. The memoir confronted abuse, loss, and addiction, not to restore fame, but to assert control over a life long silenced. It didn't erase her past but repositioned it, transforming invisible constraints into something she could finally name. Her final years were marked by illness and the lingering consequences of decades of relentless control and survival. Sandra Dee passed away quietly in 2005. There were no ceremonies, no television tributes, no national pause. The public remembered only the icon, the innocent girl, the symbol of idealized youth. But the woman behind the image, shaped and constrained from childhood, endured quietly until the end. Sandra Dee's legacy is layered. She is remembered as innocence made tangible, as comfort to a nation, yet the real Sandra, the child molded, constrained, and forced to survive in silence, remains largely unseen. She did not collapse in a single moment but gradually wore down through endless roles, controlled meals, silent endurance, and unprocessed grief. The tragedy was not that she became an icon, it was that she was never allowed to stop being one. Her story is the story of a child forced onto a stage too early, never given space to grow, and compelled to live life through the expectations of others.